Slater on the River Islands guest line. As all guests on 95.7 The Game appear on the River Islands guest line, isn't it time for you to discover the islands, River Islands, Lathrop? And speaking of like sandy beaches, I heard one Anthony Slater was hanging out in Mexico this past week. Is that true, Slates?
I'd heard Nick Friedel was hanging out in the Bay Area. That's what I'm more interested in.
Yeah, I need to get in a car, get down to El Dorado Hills in a couple hours and just start hanging out before that game. That's what I need in my life.
Golden One Center tonight. That's regular season basketball. It's a great environment. It might get the juices
I
flowing
told
again.
you, Spadone. I told you he'd be all over me about regular season basketball and all the intensity that comes with it.
In fairness, though, we were like tongue-in-cheek with the Cavs, right? Because they're 45-10, and no one really cares what the Cleveland Cavaliers do. No one's taking them seriously until the playoffs. But for this Warriors team now, Anthony, in the 3-1 in the Jimmy Butler era, right? Like, there's some extra juice now that wasn't there before in this 27-game stretch. You know, you heard Draymond say it. You heard Draymond say a lot of things, by the way. We can get into that over the All-Star game weekend. You heard Mike Dunleavy say it when they had that loss to the Mavericks. Like, these are playoff games now, so every game from here on out is going to feel like an excruciating loss, and you're going to want to be at full strength here. And we got the news yesterday when Steve Kerr joined Willard and Dibbs that, you know, he says Jonathan Kuminga, although he's returned to practice, he's still a ways off. What did you make of that, and what does a ways off mean to you for JK in his eventual return to the Golden State Warriors everyday lineup?
I think that was termed in a scarier way than reality by Steve. Like, my sense is probably maybe early road trip coming up. Again, this is more educated guessing, speculation, I guess you could say. But it's coming. They got to get him in a scrimmage. That'll come pretty soon. Post All-Star break was always kind of, it had become the timing on what has been a really bad ankle sprain. We'll see. I mean, like I said, he's got to get through the scrimmaging, and maybe that's why Steve's using some of the cautious language, but I don't think we're that far away from a Jonathan Kuminga return. So
you're saying potentially next Thursday when they head to Orlando, potentially?
Yeah, again, I'm not giving a target date.
Sure.
They're not giving a target date, but yeah, like I would say in the next couple of weeks, I would be surprised if we don't see him.
Mr. Slater, while we're on the topic of Kuminga, what is it about Kuminga's game that the Warriors think is going to fit so well with Jimmy Butler moving forward?
I mean, just extra space, extra. I think it was more identity style, like, they could switch and be small again. And y'all remember last year where it was him and Wiggins. The thought was, the data was showing them that Kuminga and Wiggins couldn't play together. And then Draymond comes back from a suspension. They go small. They start Draymond at the center, and suddenly that unlocked everything. It was Draymond at the 5, and suddenly Wiggins and Kuminga could play together. They had this small ball style that they actually won a lot of games last year with. To me, this is just kind of a supercharged version of that theoretically, which is Butler in the Wiggins spot. Butler does more than Wiggins. He passes better than Wiggins. You've seen a couple plays since Jimmy's been here where it's Steph and him in like a high pick and roll, Butler on a short roll, and then he's passing to Draymond, and Draymond's like sneaking in a layup. Well, that can now be an alley-oop throw if that's Kuminga in the dunker spot. So little stuff like that. And again, I think on the defensive end, just knowing Kuminga pretty well, I think them saying, hey, there's no more Wiggins. They need a point of attack guy that takes on some of the tougher assignments. You got Jimmy sitting in help side. Jimmy's a really good help side defender. And then obviously Draymond's one of the best ever. If you just point and shoot Kuminga at, LaMelo Ball when the Hornets come in, Kyrie potentially, although that's a tough matchup. I like him on bigger wings. But I think giving Jonathan Kuminga really tough individual assignments could kind of unlock some of his defensive potential, because I think he's a better individual defender than a team defender. So I think it's just some of that. But we'll see. I mean, to be honest, there's also probably ways him and Butler don't, mesh that well together on the court, particularly if we're talking about shooting.
Talking to Anthony Slater, our 95.7 The Game Warriors insider, covers the team for The Athletic, courtesy of the River Islands guest line. And Anthony, obviously a lot took place over All-Star Game weekend. A lot of comments, Draymond Green being a part of the television broadcast. He was part of the skills competition. But, he turned some heads when he said, we're going to win the championship. That's what he said. He said, I know we're going to win the championship. Draymond Green said that. Your thoughts on this Dubs team? And listen, championship, okay. But does this team got legit action in the West after this trade? Because, Nick and I were going through the teams of teams that Yeah, the Thunder and the Nuggets, sure. Like, those are the two teams I think everyone would put at the top. The Grizzlies are the 2 seed right now. I don't know how seriously a lot of us take them. They're very good regular season-wise, but we'll see come playoff. We saw the Thunder in the playoffs last year win a round. We've seen the Nuggets win a title. But you start going through the West, maybe it's not that crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, the West is a glut of good but not great teams. The Thunder maybe can prove that theory wrong, and if they rattle off and roll through the West playoffs right now, I think they're 8 up coming out of the break. Then probably by next season we'll be considering them something like hard to take down Goliath. But generally, I've thought the West has been a little overrated all year. But no, I'm not on the championship train either. For the Warriors, Draymond making headlines. I remember just even talking to Kevon Looney after they got Jimmy, and like the idea of their play. I do believe they raised their playoff ceiling. I think we all believe that. But Looney's basically, and he's maybe the more rational, veteran voice in the locker room, was like, hey, how about we get to the playoffs first? They're in the 9-10 with the Kings right now. The same 9-10 we saw, a year ago, April, where they got blown off the floor by the Kings. I still think they have offensive issues, scoring at the rim. We saw it in that Dallas game. How many layups did they miss? We'll see what Jimmy Butler, maybe once he gets a better rhythm, but he's kind of passing up shots on the interior too. I still think against the best defenses, and by the way, the Thunder's like a historically great defense, they're going to have trouble scoring, and then they don't have rim protection themselves, and I think they have a lot of tricky lineup combinations that don't have 2025 type floor spacing. So I'm skeptical of their real, contender potential. But yeah, sure. If we want to frame the conversation of the West is not that threatening around them, and they have Jimmy Butler, who has dragged, worse teams to the East, through the East playoffs. I don't think a team wants to see them in a series necessarily. I do think they could upset a Grizzlies, upset a Rockets. I think, as you mentioned, Nuggets and Thunder would be harder. They could get a series, but I am not predicting a deep, run into June, and I don't think y'all are either.
So the Clippers right now are 31-23. They're the 6th spot. What would it take for you? What do you think right now with the Warriors standing at the 10th seed, 28-27, got 27 games left in this regular season? Anthony Slater, how do the Warriors get to that 6th spot here?
I mean, they really just need help. Like, they got the Bucks beat the Clippers last night. I mean, that's big. You just need those teams above to lose, because 27 games. What's the best record you could possibly see them having? 20-7. I mean, I feel almost ridiculous saying it, but if you have looked, it's a pretty soft schedule. A couple Hornets games coming up. I think they have 3 more Spurs games. Obviously now,
hey, those Hornets are pesky, Anthony. I just saw what they did to the Lakers. I mean, LaMelo just driving by the great defensive effort of Luka Doncic.
Well, I mean, I would say it's crazy. You can't pencil a win in for it's no longer where you can just say, oh, Hornets, that's a definite W. It's not for sure. But look, again, I think 20-7 is too unlikely, because that would get them to 48 wins. They were 46 last year, and they're in the 9-10. So to me, what matters more than their record, although it obviously does matter down the stretch, is they need just these glut of teams above them to struggle. Phoenix is just falling off a cliff. Dallas has no centers for the foreseeable future. That's important, although they just won 2 games coming out of the break. But Sunday's game on ABC against the Mavericks will be huge. Tonight's huge. To me, right now they're very equivalent to the Kings, right? They're both 28-27. They've had real trouble with the Kings. So tonight's a big game. You're going to get a lot of head-to-head matchups. But generally, to answer your question, for them to get to the 6th seed, they need what it took to get to the 6th seed a couple seasons ago, which I don't know if y'all can bring up the standings, but I bet it was 43, 44 type wins. Whereas last year, they got 46 wins, and that was you're in the 9-10. So to me, it just matters what happens, in the direct vicinity above them to see if it's realistic or not.
Slater, the early returns with Jimmy have obviously been great. Why has he fit into the framework of that locker room so quickly?
You tell me. There's the Jimmy Butler whisperer over there in Chicago. You probably saw this coming more than I did. Again, it's the honeymoon phase. He got paid. That's pretty important. They kind of want to downplay it, but look, he came in. He got an extra $58 million in his age 37 season tacked onto his contract. Mike Dunleavy saw this coming. Yes, it is very nice. Mike Dunleavy saw this coming, right? Chicago teammate. Did you cover those Dunleavy Butler teams?
Oh, what a moment in time. Yes, I did.
Yes. So, Mike kind of knows his locker room, the Warriors locker room, and knows Jimmy, and knows just the kind of winning qualities that he'd bring. I mean, he just came in and it's, in your favorite city in Chicago, first game, and he's just like spinning in power layups, getting to the line 13 times. And what Steve Kerr called him a lion post game, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to term it. But yeah, he's just a superstar personality that there's just a gravity to his presence. And what Draymond, I don't believe in the championship, aspirations he's talking about, but I do believe that Jimmy does bring a level of winning belief to the arena. There have been a few games this year, I can remember particularly like MLK game against Boston, where you can just tell they knew, like, opening tip, like, the talent level on the floor just makes it impossible for them to win. And it was just this disheartened team. I think that was the game where Steph got subbed out, with 7 minutes to go in a blowout loss, and he's just wandering around the court just looking defeated. And I think that was just generally, like, they didn't have the horses. They didn't have the talent. And while I still don't think they have championship talent, Jimmy has brought a level of talent and personality and attitude to the locker room that they just desperately needed. Wiggins was a very good role player, but he didn't bring any of that. Again, Nick, you know him. You're probably not surprised at all as long as he's happy and content and paid like he wants to be paid. This is who he is.
Spadone, pulling the curtain back just a little bit.
Please, yeah, no, this is great. I'm loving the Chicago days.
When they made the move, I texted my boy, Mr. Slater, and I said, let me just go on record right now and say, I actually believe this is going to work. And as he just mentioned, there are a lot of various reasons why, but the part of Anthony's answer there that strikes me is the swagger. Jimmy brings belief not only to the rest of the room, Jimmy believes in himself at a level that is really kind of palpable when you're around him day to day. He just thinks he is the man. And when you're playing with the man in Steph, that's why they've had the initial success early on top of the contract that they've had.
No, absolutely. And that yin and yang, right, Anthony, that Steph and both Jimmy have alluded to, like the opposites attracting. Like, did you envision this? Like, again, it's 3-1. It's very early still. But the early returns, like when Steph speaks that glowingly early on, saying like, yeah, like we're opposites, but it worked somehow. Like, did you expect it to work that quickly as well?
Maybe not as smoothly on the court. I thought there was obviously there was a lot of focus on the train wreck of the Miami finish, but also, he doesn't shoot and, he doesn't turn the ball over, which is massive for the Warriors, right? He just despises turnovers. So I think that mindset's big. We've seen how getting to the free throw line matters. I still would like to see him score more and be more aggressive offensively. They want that. He doesn't have a feel to his scoring game right now. But I'm not surprised, honestly. And, clearly they went after Durant harder. And I think if everything had broken the direction that the front office, all the way up to the top wanted, it would probably be Durant instead of Butler. And there's an obvious argument that that's more of a talent upgrade and would make their championship aspirations more likely. But to me, the level of life that and attitude that we're talking about that Butler provides, maybe we didn't see coming fully and how that jolts the locker room. And also just he really feels in some ways almost rescued from one of the more unhappy situations that he's had in his career. He's had a few. And for him, Nick, you've been around so many locker rooms, when you have a very content, happy superstar who's every time he gets a chance is glowing about the organization. And again, sometimes it feels like subtle shots at Miami or whatever. And we all know, a year or two from now, he's not just going to be, glowing at every chance he can get about Steph or the organization and how well he's treated, whatever. But when he is in such a happy mode about, what an organization is doing for him, he's going to play really well. He's going to play through little injuries and stuff like that. And he's going to sprint to the finish line here the last 27 games. Where in Miami, you've heard the last couple of years, they feel like he's been taking sections of the regular season off. That doesn't seem to be, happening in the next couple of months.
First of all, I agree with you. I think the point is very well taken. And when Jimmy is motivated and focused, that is always the best version, and he makes it much easier to deal with whatever personality he may have day to day. Mr. Slater, Kevin Durant, your old friend from long ago, he did that interview with Malika a few days ago over the All-Star break, and he's explaining why he didn't want any kind of deal to go down midseason. This obviously centers around Kevin going into whatever happens this summer with Phoenix. But from a general standpoint, as you cover the Warriors, do you believe that they have enough assets moving forward into the summer? Let's see what happens with Kuminga to potentially land one more piece in the future to pair up with the core that they've got?
Yeah, they have they purposely traded the 2025 protected first round pick where they want this pick to convey this year's top 10 protected going to Miami. They wanted to trade this year's pick for a few reasons. Number one, they didn't love the late lottery and beyond of this draft. Everyone's hyping this draft, but we always just hype the top end of the draft. Nobody's saying like pick 11 is a generational 11th pick in the draft. And because if you trade this year's draft pick, on draft night, it unlocks, your 20, like none of the restrictions that come with the Stepien rules apply because the draft pick's been used by that point. So they got a ton of draft capital left. And to be honest, I think if, a lot of these teams view certain picks in higher regard than others, would you rather have the 2029 Warriors pick or the 2029 Spurs pick or the 2029 Thunder pick? You'd all want the Warriors pick. This is a post-Steph Curry era you're looking at. And I think those future picks are really valued by the league. And again, if you unprotect a 2029 or a 2031 Warriors pick, that's like a real jewel in this league for a team that might be trying to rebuild. Not that that's the only asset you got to give, but I think those are really high level assets where you pair with, if it was a Kuminga and a sign and trade, or, you got to match contracts, Draymond's contract's big, Jimmy Butler, if he's potentially retraded down the line, you have contract matching ability. And then, Pajemski's on a really good deal. So they have they don't have the best asset covered in the league. You'd probably say the Thunder do. But the Thunder also don't want to add a bunch of future money. They're very protective of what they have. So, yeah, I do. I mean, the long way of answering your question, I do think they have a nice little asset covered to go get somebody.
Talking with Anthony Slater. And Anthony, we appreciate the time, man, today. Got one more for you here. You alluded earlier, what were the Warriors' record as the 6th seed a couple years ago, that 2022-2023 season. They finished on a 3-game winning streak to sneak into the 6th spot at 44-38, just over the Lakers, who were 43-39. Lakers obviously got the Grizzlies in the first round. Warriors got the Kings. And then those two teams, the Lakers and the Warriors, faced off in the second round. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see if something like that could occur again, because I'm looking back at the standings then. It was wide open. It was way more wide open than it is now, because I don't think anyone was really believing fully in that Nuggets team yet. I think we have a little more belief in this Thunder team because they won a series last year, and obviously the Nuggets have won a title since then. I say all that to say this. Pressure. It always comes down to pressure, whether it's on an individual, a coach, a GM, whomever. This final 27-game stretch, who is under the most pressure in the Warriors organization during these final 27 games? Could be a player, could be a coach.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I think if you're actually, like Steph, legacy cemented. Draymond, in a lot of ways, legacy cemented. Jimmy, I mean, he's his own little personal brand situation where we could certainly go down that road and argue he is, the way he just, upended Miami and he's going to prove this trade is worth it. I'd probably, if we really talk about, career defining moments, I'd probably would say Kuminga, right? I mean, he's got a contract on the line. He's got his future on the line. He's walking back after having to miss a couple months, basically walking back into a rotation where he's going to be really necessary and needed to kind of hit the ground running. He had that really strong, finish right before the ankle sprain. And he's the other guys, not only are their legacies cemented in a lot of ways, but their contracts are secure. And Steve Kerr, we can't really Steve Kerr's under a ton of pressure. Sure, we could talk about his future, but Steve Kerr has 9 titles. The front office, I think Dunleavy's got a really strong reputation in the league, and I think people internally and externally really understand the Butler trade and why he made it at this point. So even if it flames out a little bit, it is kind of given without sacrificing too much. It's given Steph a proper level of talent and a co-star he needed. So there's I think Kuminga seems to be the obvious choice because he's the one that is trying to attain something that he hasn't yet in his career, and this is a massive couple months for him before restricted free agency.
Hey, Anthony, appreciate the time as always, man. Good to have you back here in the States after enjoying the beaches down in Mexico. And it's always good to hear you and Nick go buddy-buddy there from the old days. It's nice to hear.
Okay, can y'all come up to Golden One Center tonight? It is a terrific regular season environment. It's a big game, 28-27 against 28-27 in state, and watch some good regular season basketball.
Anthony Slater Bontemps right there, everybody.
Wow. I don't know if I like
selling that regular season game hard. I love it.
Thanks, Anthony.
I'm just saying, you enjoy the environment
I'll
tonight.
see you Sunday, big fella.
All right, there you go. Well, that should be good, too, actually. Jimmy Butler's home debut.
And Iggy's retirement ceremony. That'll be fun.
There are always storylines with the Warriors you can bank on.
Always.
Every time.
Appreciate it, Anthony.
All right, fellas.
There he goes. That's Anthony Slater, who joins us on the River Island.